Do we want to wait a bit longer, or do we want to jump into it?
You guys ready?
I am good with whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mapmaking Spotlight. We're doing another interview with competition entrants. This time we have AvengedRuler and HolyKau with their PRNG Nexus.
Hello.
Hello.
It's me, Substitute AvengedRuler, who will be interviewing AvengedRuler today.
Hello, Substitute. Alright, I guess, do we want to just start at introductions, or do we want to start, like, more just about the Nexus in general? Talking about how you came up with the idea.
Yeah, why don't we just start with how did you get started on the project? Where did it start?
Oh, I can speak to that a bit.
Because this one's got more of a
Really?
story behind it.
Yeah, this project started sometime around the time of last competition. Let me just open something up on my end. Alright, need to open an older version. But basically all this started with was... If you can switch to my screen for a sec, Skyhawk.
Yeah, for sure.
Basically all this idea started as was using this and thinking this looked like an old arcade machine.
Yeah.
Like this kind of aesthetic.
Oh, so this is one of your test files? Or, like, older copies of a file?
Not as old as I would like, but yeah. This is something I can show without the backdrops that we have now.
It's nice having old files. We don't really see much of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've probably got even older than this somewhere, but... Yeah, this is just what I have on hand right now.
Cool.
So,
So it didn't necessarily start with the script idea, it just started with this aesthetic?
no. Then the script came in because...
Oh.
As Skyhawk probably knows, around the time that I would have been starting this project last year, we had Advent of Code, and I was feeling like taking on some new scripting projects.
Yeah.
So I inquired to Skyhawk about how... I think I had seen this map on your stream or something. I knew you had made this map.
Yeah, it's as yet unreleased. Because it doesn't
Oh.
really
Yes,
have...
because it's
Oh,
uncompletable.
It's like
Yeah,
a-
which is essentially just an
tech
infinite
demo.
maze.
Yeah.
Which was
Uh,
released in Infinite Maze. That's a good
Yeah, how
one.
about we describe what exactly this is?
Yeah.
So basically what this does is this has these defined sections, and then it, within a certain area, knows to load some amount of sections above or below you depending on where you...
Maybe turn on frame advance and zoom out while you're playing.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is just kind of like a tech demo for creating dynamically generated sections. So
Funny enough, I didn't end up using a lot of this, because this was way more complicated than mine needed to be, but...
yeah, it was a little different than what you intended for, to like have actual gameplay.
Yeah, because this one you actually need to like store the section somewhere, whereas mine you don't.
Yeah, because you only need to move them into place once.
But yeah, that gave me the idea. Past that, lots of little tech demos while I was working things out. So one thing you'll notice
That is a lot
on
of
Dustforce
copies.
Arcade. Let me just get to the first level. One thing you'll notice on this first level is we don't have any vertical sections on this first level. That's because when I started this project, I had zero idea how to make them work.
Yeah, so it's all just one long hallway.
Yeah. As I got closer to the end of the project, I liked the idea of having that anyways, because it kind of supported this advancement throughout the level of adding certain types of mechanics in, but
Ah, yeah.
at the start of the project, it was very simply, I did not know how to put it in quite yet.
Yeah. I think you're right, though. I think it does work out well of, like, just slowly introducing more difficulty, more complexity with each level.
Yeah.
It's a nice side effect.
Well, and it's funny, because the way that I used to do... the way that I used to do vertical sections as well has evolved over time. Now, it's really simple to do them, because all I do now is basically just define 2 connection points for each section, and basically just do all the math based on those connection points.
Okay.
I used to, for each one of these levels, have like a running total of where the height was, and it just didn't end up working out as well.
Yeah.
And ended up being a lot more bookkeeping to deal with.
Right. So,
If anyone is curious, continue.
no, you first.
If anyone is curious how I tested all this stuff, though, you get rid of
I'm currently I'm hoping to continue that story of how everything reaches today.
Yeah, that's what I
If
was
you want to
thinking,
go into
but
the
we
specific,
can continue on
we
this
could save
tangent
that
until...
for- yeah. Like little tangents like this are fine, but
Yeah.
I think
So-
we'll keep to the story too first.
Okay. This kind of relates to the story, so I'll go into this. So, obviously, with something that's going to be moving tiles, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to screw anything up in my actual map, so I made this small test map and was able to test lots of things here.
Yeah.
This is where I initially tested vertical sections, this is where I initially tested ending sections,
I see props
and initially
in there.
tested just basically how this worked in general.
Yeah, there's got to be
'Cause-
tons of like leftover artifacts from testing because of so many different things you got to test.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
like especially
Figure
with
out
a
what you wanted
random
to do.
thing, like you never know if what you're experiencing is like always gonna work, or if it's maybe there's a certain seed that makes everything just fall apart.
Yeah, and I remember that some other issues we ran into when we were working on this map, just random instance cases of things not working, but
That was
Yeah.
another thing I realized once we started adding more and more sections, is that this gets harder and harder to test, like the different kind of connections you can have between the sections,
Yeah,
and making sure
I
they
mean,
mostly
even-
work.
even like first of all, just okay, I made a section. How do I get to play it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so I
that's
think
something you
that's,
got to just write in.
that's part of the reason I think that we put these sections kind of close together, so you can kind of flow through them without having them generate.
Oh,
or
so just
placing
like
your,
yeah,
yeah.
test them in the kind of storage area. I guess we can
Mhm, mhm.
kind of go. Well, maybe we'll get to that later. But so back to the kind of story. You were working on this script for a while before the
Yeah,
competition was
so-
announced. And then, so kind of how far did you get on this before the competition? And then when the competition was announced, how did you kind of shift gears to turning it into a competition submission?
So for the competition, I had something mostly working that basically just had some instance bugs we had to work out, and some unloading issues, which happened to be more of an issue than I realized, which I needed to figure out, but
Yeah.
whole
So
other
just
point
with-
entirely.
With things being too far away to like load into the script.
Yes. For reference on that, I'm just going to bring this up quick to show the actual scale of what level 2 has to have for map.
Oh wow, yeah, that is very large. You can't even draw all of it.
You still run out of space on level 2 sometimes, I might add.
Jeez.
This is still not enough. It needs to go more to the right than
Huh.
this.
Yeah, so if
yeah.
you get a good enough seed, you start losing the background, I think.
Yes, you do, for sure.
That's funny.
And it's just one of those things that late into the project, I just didn't want to shift more things around. Beside the point for this conversation. Previously, something Zaandaa had suggested to me for this idea was making a small nexus to introduce the idea.
Let me clarify a little on that. So at some point, like let's say a few months before the competition itself was announced, I think I was watching your stream, and like I already knew as a result like that you were working on this kind of stuff, and I was thinking about like different things that we could do in general, and like what we're kind of lacking in the community a little bit, and the idea of turning projects like this into nexuses was something that resonated with me, especially following last year's competition and seeing some of the longer maps being made for that. Like my comments for some of those, like Twinkies, were along the lines of like, this could have been a nexus actually. You could have done some of this kind of stuff in a nexus. So I gave that I had a little talk with Avenged about like, hey, why not turn something like this into a nexus, because then you can focus on like spreading out certain pieces of info about like introducing people to the concept, either gradually or with some amount of a difficulty curve. You can demonstrate it in a lot of different ways. So then eventually, however many months later, I ended up just doubling down on the Nexus's idea for when the competition was announced.
And then it ended up being just kind of part of the format where people could submit either.
Yeah.
So this, in a way, this Nexus and this like idea was kind of part of the inspiration for how the competition was created and structured.
I mean, it was kind of in the back of my head, but it was always a possibility. It was certainly not like the number one thing, but it was a catalyst for sure. Just trying to just like, hey, turn this into a Nexus. That'd be great.
Right.
Wouldn't releasing this as a Nexus be great? Like that.
Yeah.
We lost the share screen, by the way.
I'm aware we lost screen. I'm confused how we lost screen.
What do you mean?
Did you crash?
Yeah, my game crashed.
Oh.
I switched over to
Very
my screen
confused
for now.
as to how.
But yeah.
Now, there was actually some discussion with a few people about what we should allow for Nexuses in the competition, like how much previous work would be allowed.
Right, because there is the potential for somebody who has already been working on a Nexus for a long time to just completely dominate the competition because they've had so much more time to polish it and work on it.
Yeah, for example, like I knew Maddie had a pretty polished Nexus in the works already.
Which is coming out soon.
We'll hear more about that hopefully.
Is it soon or soon TM?
I don't know.
TM. It's in the testing stage.
But I just know that like Maddie at least had one, or has been working on one. Hopefully, will get released in the near future.
Yeah.
Like Dello and Twinkie were thinking about some.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen Twinkie work on his on stream before.
Yeah.
The scale of their Nexuses, like that's something that you can't really compete with in a short amount of time. Compared to like what someone can do in a small amount of time. Something like what Dello and C made, like they clearly put a lot of work into theirs. Like that's
for sure.
Getting close to that level. It had some extra gameplay in the Nexus itself, but like that arguably wouldn't have been able to compete even.
Depending on
what else was existing.
Yeah. So to try to mitigate that.
Avenged only had like the script in mind and not even fully working or anything like that. So he didn't pose to have a significant advantage or anything like that. So it ended up being okay.
Yeah, and other people ended up using scripts that already existed anyway, like just Entity Outliner and music things. So I think it was a fair concession to make. But to kind of mitigate like people using a bunch of pre-existing work, we I think we restricted it to just a smaller number of levels, so that people wouldn't win just on amount of content.
Yeah.
So you can't have just a full 75 map Nexus, and there you go, you get first place.
Yep. That was a big part of the idea.
So, Avenged, how did... Because you kind of started with this script, and then you decided to use it for competition submission, and you got Kau involved. How did that kind of work out?
So, I had an idea. I had somewhat of a plan in mind. The one thing I did not have was time.
Yeah.
Throughout the first month of the competition, I was very busy in another game, and I felt bad using some of my pre-existing gameplay and wanted more, at least for this final map.
Sure.
So I enlisted Kau to help with making some gameplay sections.
Yeah, so Avenged chose the new dad, who also does not have a lot of time, to help out with the time issue.
Good
And so
choice.
I helped out with what I could.
Yeah.
Making like gameplay sections and some backgrounds.
Cool. So what kind of stuff, like, when the competition started, what did you guys kind of work on first? Is it just expanding the arcade, or kind of working on the rest of the Nexus?
Yeah, so when the competition started, I asked Kau to make some sections for the arcade. Specifically, I think you mostly worked on level 1 and level 2, right? And then just a few more in level 3?
Yeah, I think I spent most of my time on level 1 and 2. Added about another like 6 each, I think.
Okay.
And then maybe
I think you
3
might have
or
made a
4.
bit more than that in one and
Yeah.
2. I think you made like 8 and 2.
Mhm. And then only a section 3.
Yeah,
Do
there's
you end up
not...
doing any stats on like how many pieces and how many possible arrangements there could be?
No. I
Uh,
didn't do
no.
math.
Yeah, you can do the math.
I should do the math, because it would be fun, but no.
Do you have any idea?
So-
Is that 16?
Alright, yeah, okay, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12,
It's 17.
15, 16, 17, and then this one's the ending, yeah.
Is
17
it
on
always
level
4
1.
segments?
It's always 3 segments on level 1, 4 on level 2, and 5 on level 3.
Oh, okay.
So we can just throw these into Google, right? Out of 17 sections, choose
I
from
think
3, you have
that's how that works.
680.
Jeez. Yeah, so many different levels, all in just one Nexus.
But yeah, if you look at some of the more top sections, those are more so Kau's than mine.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. It's like, who made what?
Yeah, I kind of added the stuff on, I'd say, the edges of the available sections, I guess, because I would just kind of build around what Avenged had already built.
Okay, cool. Just like take whatever space is there.
Yeah. I'd say I tended to gravitate more towards kind of boosty gameplay, whereas Avenge was more air control,
Attacky gameplay.
yeah, attacky gameplay.
No, that wasn't
The
being
label's
built at
gonna
all.
stick.
Oh, well, I mean, we have established that Kau didn't do as much on level 3.
Okay, that's fair enough. But no, attacky wasn't necessarily my point with this map. My idea with gameplay for this map was kind of simple but puzzly gameplay.
I guess that makes
Which-
sense for an RNG themed Nexus.
Yeah, some of that kind of comes out in more of my initial sections, but a lot of it comes out in some of my level 2 sections where you don't necessarily have 100% obvious routes through them.
Yeah, a lot of level 2, a lot of magma run. Those are really heavy on air charge usage, and really
Yeah.
needing this time, or really needing to space out everything.
Which one was it? There was one section that I found like a lot harder than all the others. I'm trying to see if I can spot it. Oh yeah, it was this
There were
one.
a few tough ones that stood out to me.
Yeah,
This one seemed.
Yeah, that one.
I've heard of this section way too many times. I heard about it in playtesting. I made some changes to it before releasing it.
Yeah, you just gotta take out some of that stuff if you keep hearing bad stuff, unfortunately. Or
Like,
if not take out, but
it's-
like fully refine.
Yeah, it's hard sometimes to make that call.
I mean, the problem with this section is you don't know what's coming up, and then you don't know what's intended to be the strat. Like
Yeah.
what you think could be the route is often not gonna be what's intended. But you
so
just you don't know what's coming up exactly.
For the record, let me show you what the intended route is on that section.
Sure.
Just because I feel like this is a hotly contested topic among various people.
Okay.
I definitely did not get it first try.
I see.
Wow.
That does look much nicer.
Yeah, that's all I intended.
Okay. Well,
Yeah,
your pro strats
I
for
mean, I
anybody who
find
wants
it
to grind
really. So there's something that I really want to address with the Mapmaker community for Dustforce, and I've said it multiple times before. With like when you think about how some of these levels compare to Mario Maker, in Mario Maker there are some established in community like symbols that'll tell you what is coming up next or like what you need to do, like this, do a spin jump for this little Z sign.
Are there? I mean,
Um,
I'll take your word
yeah.
for it. I don't really.
Like within the Mario Maker community, there are a lot of established things like that that like people are just used to looking for, and they're common enough to the point where like people that aren't as involved in the community are gonna be more aware of them.
Right, I guess just
Um,
because you play maps and you see those symbols being used, and you're like, when you make a map,
Yeah.
it's, oh, this is what I'll use here.
Yeah, it really helps a lot with well, playability, you can say.
One of the judging
but-
criteria. How
yeah.
about that?
But that's something that you don't see at all in Dustforce.
I would
And,
disagree
like, there-
completely. I would say
Okay,
that
well,
Dustforce absolutely has its own
I
set of
do-
guidelines.
I don't want this conversation to kind of
But yeah, it's
like supersede.
we could go on about
Avenged
this for
Nexus,
hours.
But I am not. I don't think you don't have any good argument there, personally,
All right, well.
from what I've seen.
So
Anyway,
just more
as for
arrow
how that
cross is what we can do.
ties back into this map, what were you going to say about that section, or just sections in general?
Was that directed more at Zaandaa?
Yeah, it's Zaandaa. Like, so
Yeah,
how does that
me.
tie back into this Nexus?
Well, there's no like the big criticism is so for stuff like those kinds of sections, you can't see all of the information that's on the screen, or you can't see what's an intended route or anything until after you come up to something that you're gonna fail, because
Right. So
Yeah,
in the
you're not
context
gonna
of
understand
this
that.
particular one, when you're here, you see two routes. You don't necessarily know which one is the right one to take first.
yes.
Yeah.
So that is a camera kind of issue. But in addition to that, there's so many other things about this. Like, so there's the conditioning that some Dustforce maps, and very specifically certain customs, like, so one of the only uses where there can be like something that's more common in the custom community is the light and then heavy prisms, like the one inside each other.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that does get used quite a bit in this
so-
Nexus. In these sections.
not like, well, yeah, it is used pretty often in this Nexus actually. But like that's not what I'm trying to describe. Like, you see it, you don't see how it's related to anything. Like, you don't know what you're supposed to do in the gameplay of this map, and the gameplay never allows itself to flow. Like, all of these really spaced out jump sections, they never really they never feel fun. They never feel like they end up flowing in any way. Like you described it earlier as a kind of puzzle aspect, where like, you know, you have to figure it out sometimes. I didn't get that intent at all in the map design. Like that was something that like you're just that's something that's news to me, hearing it now, which was not something that felt like it was the case when I was actually playing the levels. So that, like, trying to communicate that kind of thing to me should have been important, if it was that important of the design philosophy.
I guess one of the other kind of design aspects of this Nexus and this script that maybe ties into that is the decision to make the seed kind of manipulatable based on your actions in the area. So, like, could you tell us kind of how the seed generation works and why you decided to make it that way?
Seed generation works by setting a seed based on actions you do in some starting area. Specifically, the common 4 actions: dash, jump, flight, heavy. One of the things that... how to explain this? One of the things I'm realizing more and more, I don't necessarily know that I thought about it at the time, is I was trying to make a map that would feel like a Dustforce map,
Sure.
and not necessarily something that wouldn't feel like Dustforce.
Right.
And I think the only way you can do that in a map like this is to make it more of a route-finding map, where you can set your seed to whatever you want and know it'll be that way the same every time.
Okay. Yeah, because people are definitely used to that gameplay loop of you start up a map, you get to an obstacle, you learn that obstacle, and then you reset and try it again, but better.
In retrospect, based on judges' comments and other feedback, I don't know. I don't know a lot about this map anymore.
I mean,
I'll be
that's...
entirely honest.
It is definitely a unique idea. Like, it is new. Like, Dustforce has never had a map like this. So
Yeah, and someone had to start somewhere.
exactly. Yeah. So this is pushing the boundaries of, I think, like what custom maps can kind of be in this game, and so you're gonna have problems with people's expectations and like just teaching just how to kind of play through this section and learn how the route works and that kind of thing. So I think this is a good first step, and there are some things that maybe people would disagree with, but as a proof of concept, I think it works great.
But yeah, that's kind of the idea behind it, is if you have kind of a more settable seed, it becomes more of a route generation map and less of a RNG challenge.
Mm-hmm.
I did have references to more RNG methods of setting seeds from the aforementioned Skyhawk script.
Yeah.
But I chose not to go that direction.
Mm-hmm. Because, like you said, you want it to be more of a standard Dustforce experience, like more what people are used to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Here, let me just... While I've been looking through levels 1 and 2, let me look through level 3 as well. And so...
Level 3 was interesting.
Yeah, how so?
So, level 3, I wanted to make these kind of short, confined sections.
Mm-hmm.
My initial thought with it was make it even more RNG and just have a ton of sections. Have like 25 sections.
Yeah, and I think
Then
it didn't quite work out that way.
Then I realized when you have smaller spaces, it somewhat limits the gameplay you can add.
Ah, okay. So you mean like when you have smaller sections, like in terms of just you have this limited gameplay area that you can build in?
Yeah, like there's only so much you can do with a diagonal down section with a 5-tile high room.
Right.
And have it be interesting.
Okay. Yeah, because it does seem like a lot of these sections, use this gameplay theme of having small little blocks with dust on them that you have to attack. Some might call it an attacky theme.
I knew you were gonna say that.
Oh, it's not as bad as that.
I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying I think you have a style.
I think I want to make more attacky maps eventually, but this is not one of them. Attacky is a fantastic map outside of Ringcast.
Yeah, it's a fantastic map series.
Nope.
I was
there's
a little
never been
concerned when
sequel.
I got to a certain point in level 2 when
Oh, yeah.
judging, and I saw hints of that kind of stuff, so I made a joke about like, uh-oh, this is gonna turn into attacky. And I am glad that it didn't, you know,
Yeah,
fully
didn't go full
address that
attacky.
gameplay.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that'd be interesting
Oh.
to put in a RNG level is some more attacky, high APS stuff.
yeah,
And see how it works
I
out.
think that
I
sounds
think
like a
'cause-
terrible idea.
you did mention like it was kind of a puzzle intention, so I think having those kinds of sections where even in a non-RNG map it's very much a puzzle might be interesting to see, like, okay, how much of this can you figure out on the fly? But yeah, it's worth
As long
exploring.
as there's like, maybe. As long as you make it so that there's not stupid raycasting issues or any of that type of stuff, I think it might be able to work.
Yeah. So
So,
you guys kind of made that level and you expanded out the number of sections there. And then, so did you do like all of that first and then worked on the Nexus, or were you kind of doing both at the same time? Like expanding the level while you were working on everything else?
so basically, my concept here was I had Cal work on most of the stuff that I needed done on Dustforce Arcade that wasn't related to scripting.
Okay.
And then I took care of the rest of this Nexus stuff that needed to be done to create a Nexus.
Okay, cool.
So I made introductions and Magma Run and the Nexus almost entirely myself.
Yeah.
And just had Cow there for gameplay testing and such.
How did you kind
Yeah,
of
I
figure
didn't
out...
touch the
Oh.
Nexus at all.
Okay. How did you kind of figure out like the story progression? Because we kind of have this thing where you start in the forest and you go over the mountain to the arcade. Did you come up with that first, or did you come up with the levels and then came up with a story to fit that?
Introductions, I had an idea of kind of these. You're in a dark woods, you might not realize where you're going. Figured that might be a decent place to start. It's a fairly simple aesthetic. Basically, the other kind of thing I wanted to do in this Nexus was make it more random and more punishing as you go on. So,
Right. Yeah. So, for
introductions,
example-
you only have 6 possible gameplay sections. Like, and one of them's just an apple section. There's not really too much you can do with these. You can only die on a few of them.
yeah. So kind of ease people into it.
Well, Miles
Whereas-
does really want to know about these apples.
Like
Oh.
like how they were placed, or like
How they
to
were
get to them.
designed
Yeah.
to be played, or did you have any specific intentions? What did you want to do with them? Did you just put them in and then be
I will
like, hey, yeah,
speak
that's how it's gonna work?
To Magma Run and introductions first.
Sure.
Dustforce Arcade, whole nother story.
Yeah, it has its own kind
yeah.
of side quest.
Introductions and Magma Run, I kind of just placed them in places that would be kind of awkward and tried to make something that would end up being a little interesting. On introductions, because there's only 6 sections, I didn't mind making it entirely RNG based, where you had to get all 3 of the apple sections. On something like Magma Run and Dustforce Arcade, though, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want you to have to get a 3 out of 17, a 4 out of 15, and a 5 out of 11.
What?
You
Why
know,
not?
I
I don't know. We kind
Because
of
that
respect
sounds
Skyhawk's time.
It was actually kind
That
of a
sounds
cool
dumb and not
challenge,
fun.
like trying to find the seeds that worked. I couldn't remember what generated the right seed this time. Here, let me.
Yeah,
Well-
just for the really little ones, I think it's okay. But you know, I agree. I wouldn't want to grind for the huge, little, tiny
yeah. So
window.
Magma Run, basically, you only have to get 2 sections out of 4 that are chosen from 10. So it's not as bad, and then you do a bunch of stuff after.
Yeah.
Because I felt like having some fun with that one.
Yeah,
I'm sure Skyhawk enjoyed it.
it has a bit more apple flying, a little bit more boomerang. Just time spent doing that.
Did you consider apple juggling over the
did.
death zones or anything in Magma Run, especially?
Yes, there's actually an apple outside of the death zone,
Yeah.
which is where the apple
Oh.
flying comes from.
Yeah, you gotta get up over that just to get to
So
that
that's just
last
straight
apple.
up required.
Yep.
It turns out.
Yeah,
Okay.
so my original idea with Magma Run was you have to take the apple from inside the mountain after you generate the level,
Okay.
bring it all the way back up, and use that to fly outside of the map, and then come back in and finish the level. The reason I didn't want to do that is because I liked the stun triggers, and I couldn't figure out a great way to get rid of them.
Right.
The one interesting thing I did realize in the process of doing this, though, and I really hope somebody tries to do this, is because of how I set up these apples, you could technically SS the level twice with the same seed.
Oh yeah,
or
so like
go
you
through
just
the level twice with the same seed, and I want to see if somebody can SS it while doing that.
yeah, so like around this point, instead of continuing, you would drop back down and go through the cave again, and you would have left
Yeah.
dust. That'd be funny.
I wasn't
Although I
thinking about
suppose you
that,
could
but
just
I
apple
was.
fly.
I wasn't thinking about taking the apple with you, but I was wondering how many times you could go through the same seed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious on that myself, so I would be very interested if somebody wants to test that eventually,
Yeah,
or
I
if
think
somebody wants to actually do some routing on that.
there's probably a few sections that like require just killing enemies that you would need. Like you wouldn't have them a second time around, so you wouldn't be able to get through that section twice. But
Oh, there is for sure.
yeah. Other than that,
Yeah,
I think
it would.
So if we combine Spiraler's script with your script,
What is
oh,
Spiraler's
the baby
script?
playground, the lap count.
yeah, you do laps around the
Ah.
same map.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So Twinkie in chat asked, what was the decision made to make this into a Nexus instead of a single level with a lot of seeds? I think we talked about that a little bit, but we didn't really talk about like how you kind of like you didn't quite split it up. You kept one large level as well as some smaller introductory levels. So just kind of designing
Yeah.
that. I think it was kind of accumulated decisions rather than just one.
Well, the
was kind of
first
the
like
series of
15
choices.
minutes of this, we did just kind of go over that story. But
Yeah.
if you want to go more into detail for that, go ahead.
Described it well earlier. It was basically just a combination of a suggestion from Zaandaa on making a Nexus for this type of thing, and kind of agreeing that it would be a nice way to introduce the concept.
Yeah, and I think just from some of the judge comments, like it sort of worked, but then it also like people were a little confused because the introduction comes later, just because that was the original design intention. So I think
Yeah.
it is noticeable that the decision was made a little bit into the development, but it still worked.
It honestly did come across as strange. All of that together. Like, do you want me to expand more on why I felt that way?
On why you felt like that it should be a Nexus, or why you felt that just how it
The
worked out?
execution of the Nexus in the end, with like introductions, the level. Unless that's not what you were talking about.
Yeah, I guess we can talk about it a little bit, just because like I think it is a part of the story about how the Nexus got made and that kind of thing.
Well, I was going to bring up judge reception,
Oh, sure.
not anything else. Like, do you want to talk about that now or not?
Yeah, we can talk about it now.
Well, all right. So this is a kind of design-specific thing, but it just felt like some of the Nexus was more detached than other parts. Like, if you took out introductions and Magma Run, and only had the original levels, in the 1, 2, 3, and
Yeah, so just
arcade.
the one building here.
Yeah, you already do a big info dump in the beginning of each one of those. It felt like that was sufficient, and it didn't really make use of the script or anything in the Nexus. So the judges did find that kind of kind of hard to deal with. Like the gameplay was just kind of spread out in terms of quality of each section. Like some pieces just didn't flow quite as well as others, but like what was refined was it was really good.
Mm-hmm. On the other hand, like I do think that in an alternate reality there is a Nexus that is just, it starts here and it's just the arcade and it's very polished and like well focused. But on the other hand, I do like the idea to experiment with these other themes. Like there's a lot of games that have just lost in a shifting forest. And so I think
100% agree, but it was backwards from my point of view.
Mm-hmm. I would
like if these weren't introduction levels and they were like just little bonus things, like hey, look what we can do now that you know all this stuff. Here's it with this theme. Here's it with this theme.
Yeah, I could see that.
That was my personal take on it.
Okay.
But I do think that the Nexus as a whole would have, like, other than like the levels themselves fitting into where they are in the Nexus, visually they match up very nicely. Other than that, as a complete package, the levels 1, 2, 3, and arcade all fit together really nicely. Outside of these levels.
Yeah, I think that's a good assessment.
Mm-hmm.
I think we haven't. We did go into Magma Run briefly, and we talked about the secret, but we didn't really talk about the sections and the generation here.
Yeah. To be clear, Zaandaa, two things. One, I fully understand and respect Judge's comments on that, and I do agree that the quality on Magma Run and introductions is less. Just honestly 100% because of time. I just had things I wanted to get done on Dustforce Arcade, and those were more important to me than finishing up these maps.
Yeah, I never want to ask people to like cut content or anything like that, but like as a developer, you just kind of have to know when to do that.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, it is definitely a hard decision to make.
It's one of those things as well, as I was saying earlier, I kind of liked the idea of leading into this more random kind of map. I felt like having Dustforce Arcade being early in the Nexus would feel like a lot. Having just a 2-minute map near the start.
Yeah, because you have this kind of ramping up of number of sections.
Honestly, I mean, felt
those
like it would be a
just
lot.
Fit really well together.
Yeah. Without the individual levels, I would have felt like it would have felt like a lot after just introductions and Magma Run, which is why I included the individual levels.
Into the deep end.
Yeah.
Cool.
I will say as well, on the some sections not flowing quite as well, there is some amount of, because it's meant to be a route finding map, there is some amount of just not caring if some sections are obviously longer than others. And that may play into why some sections feel less refined than others.
I think maybe it's also a limitation of the format. Like, when you don't know what order things are going to be in, it's hard to design a flow from one section to the next.
Yeah, because with Dustforce, I think the way that we define flow is usually going fast, but boosting blindly is a little bit hard to do when you don't know what section's coming next.
Right,
You gotta
like
make
if
sure
you have-
that everything kind of flows in that sense too. Like you can come at it with 522 speed, or you can come into it with 1500, and it makes a big difference.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Of what's
Yeah,
Yeah, so
available
I
to you as a
partially
player.
agree with that. I mean that statement's very important. But one of the things that I also mean is like the amount of time that you spend at that 522 speed is like one there's that, but the gameplay itself is incredibly linear for that aspect of it, and there's a lot of it. There's like in watching Skyhawk play right now, he's not really doing much in terms of the kind of gameplay that he's doing. It's just like a lot of long jumps, a lot of waiting, and just sequences of attacking things in a certain order. But there's a lot of empty space, and the attacks themselves are straightforward for the most part. The puzzles have to do with like the air charge for the most part.
Yeah, air charge management.
Sometimes it has to do with don't attack the enemy this way, but they're all like so spaced out in a way that feels like it's not going to give you any ability to like play around in the level. So
Actually, I kind of feel like that's at different skill levels you kind of see different challenges. Like if you're really good at the game, then just covering these large distances in the air is just not a problem. You're used to it, and there's not much flexibility. Like when you're in the air, you don't want to be dashing constantly because you only have one air charge, so you can't have that dash rhythm layer of complexity. And so I think just it's a consequence of this aerial design where you have like this floor that's lava, you can't touch it. You're kind of limited to this slower, more spread out design aspect. Or you're limited to just having a bunch of walls and attacks, and you get stuck in that kind of attacky format. So
when I was testing these maps for Avenged, I never really mentioned that to him, and I felt like that was because it was a design choice to have it sort of
absolutely
play out slower.
I would
so
agree.
You had time to think.
Yeah, that's kind of the sense that I get as well.
I mean, it's something that doesn't have like a clear answer or anything. It's just it's always going to be like a feeling.
For sure.
Like it just feels a certain way compared to other maps. Pretty much.
Yeah.
So like in order to really figure out how to refine it, you have to look at the best and worst of like prism maps, for instance, because those are usually pretty heavy on things like air control, and you want to look for how those prism maps will like be executed well compared to the ones that aren't.
Yeah, I guess in general prism maps do tend to be denser.
Yeah, but never like too dense or too tight unless like it gets really messy. So
I think I've played quite a few that get to that point.
Well, yeah, but I'm talking about like a general aspect. You know, if there's so much going on screen at once, then it's a specific kind of map that really desires that kind of gameplay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So, like, yeah, it's good that you have a desired gameplay, at least. But I don't feel like most people appreciated it because of that kind of gameplay.
Well, I think we've kind of talked about each map a bit. We've talked about kind of how the Nexus came into being. I guess one more thing that I want to ask is what was kind of your favorite part to work on or part to play through? Like maybe what were you the most satisfied with and you felt it went really well?
Oh, just Dustforce Arcade. Dustforce Arcade is...
Like maybe even more specifically, like within Dustforce Arcade, was there like a certain section that you really liked or...
I mean, I was really happy with the Dustforce Arcade secret until somebody's stream showed me that some text was missing where it was supposed to be.
Oh, yeah. This is just one little thing. Here, Let's see if I can get all the way to it. I don't know if I will be able to get all the way to it. We'll see.
That's the other thing we never finished talking about was
Yeah, good
secrets
point.
in Dustforce Arcade.
Yeah, so
Okay.
here, first thing we see is that there are these strange codes on the wall.
So
Ooh.
this secret is another story of its own.
Sure.
So two things went through my mind for the secret on this map. I want to have an apple section on every level, and I want something akin to a Farewell Golden ending room, where
Oh yeah,
it's
like
only
from
something
Celeste.
that shows up when you've done all this other stuff right, and it's specific to that.
Yeah.
On that wavelength, I had a couple of things come to mind. First was, you may notice in the first room, I specifically say something to the effect of, if you do special actions, special generation may occur.
Yeah.
It was always my intent from the start of the project to have something that happens when you super in that main room. And
Okay.
to have a way to get an apple into it. So
Yeah, it took
that
me a
was
while
my
to figure
initial
out
idea.
Just, took a while to figure out
Was-
that supering was the way to reveal the next thing.
Yeah,
Tried, like
so
everything else. But yeah.
that kind
Yeah,
of
I
led me in
certainly
a
wouldn't
couple
have guessed
directions.
that because, it's just light and heavy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
funny
it's-
enough, the way I checked that is actually based on attack state. It's not based on intents at all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I figured because I had tried mashing buttons and it didn't work, but yeah, you gotta specifically bring the apple in to get enough for a super. I was surprised
Yeah,
actually
so-
when the apple warped with you. I thought for sure it would just be, oh, you warp the player, but no, it was you warp everything in that section.
Yep, and the only reason that works is because those triggers are mine, not teleport triggers.
Yeah. Well, it has to be
I
custom
specifically coded it in for that reason,
code.
which
Now
I
can
might
take it
add was
back.
another scripting test I had to do at some point.
Yeah, just a lot of debugging all the time, everywhere.
Yeah. So, the second idea I had. So, after I had that idea, my initial thought for the secret was, well, maybe supering in this first room kind of breaks the game and you have to do more gameplay. So, I was thinking maybe after you finish level 1, level 2, level 3, you get a second generation of all three of them.
Okay.
And you basically have to do 6 levels instead of 3.
Yeah, kind of like a boss rush sort of thing.
Yeah. At some point in the project, I realized this kind of sounded annoying to make. And
And you were running out of time potentially.
in retrospect, after the competition, I realized, there would probably be a lot of issues with unloading if I was going to try to do that.
Yeah.
And many other things that could have gone wrong with such a setup.
All right.
So I decided to scrap that idea.
Yeah.
Still contemplating just releasing a full map sections, just because I'm curious how long the map would actually be. But
Right.
whole other conversation.
So how did you kind of land on what it's currently?
So instead of making them play more, I figured maybe for each section there's something they need to figure out from it, which is where the idea for this code came from. So for each unique gameplay section, you have one piece of this long stringing code, which you can figure out, or you're supposed to be able to figure out when you start a level. You'll see some random string of characters, which honestly I'm surprised more people never took note of.
Yeah. I
Seems like a
certainly
lot of
noticed
people
it
just-
was unusual, but
Yeah,
Yeah, I noticed it wasn't the seed, and I saw in the editor that you had some stuff associated with it, and I was just like, I'm not gonna fully touch the secret myself.
I think probably, like, because the first two maps do just show the seed as text, it might have been maybe confused for that. And so people just were like, oh, that's the seed, and didn't look into it any further.
Maybe.
But,
It also
Yes,
does kind of
I-
look like a scary puzzle, so...
yeah. Little bit.
Yeah, so initially I had much more complicated codes than this. I had like 2 letters per number, and then
Oh, yeah.
that sounded like a lot more work, so I just figured they're probably not going to brute force a 43 component long code,
Yeah, who'd be crazy
You
enough
know,
to do that?
because who would ever do that? I mean,
Yeah, I did end up having to actually do the intended method to get, like, most of them.
oh, I know.
Because, yeah, I think I brute forced maybe, like, 10 of the digits before giving up.
Yeah, so I thought, trying to think of what to put for those letters was also an interesting kind of thought process.
Yeah.
Because it's like, you can't do... I didn't want to make it incredibly obvious, but I didn't want to make it incredibly obscure either. So I kind of went with... I think I went with WASD plus ZXC for base controls plus
Yeah, and then you did T for dash.
something for dash.
You should have done R for reset.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for people who just haven't. I think that would have been
And-
literally, like, you just could not press it. Yeah, it just ignores it if you...
Funny enough, another weird instance issue I ran into when furiously making this 6 hours before the deadline. You cannot have the area that you're doing these codes in the starting area, or it causes conflicts,
Oh, yeah.
which make the sequence not work,
Huh.
or something. I don't remember exactly.
That is very strange.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what the problem was with that, but I had to, like, physically separate those two so that they actually work. So yeah, that was the other thing, is all of the Apple gameplay other than level 1, I think the Apple area and all the scripting for it had to happen on the last
On the last what? Sorry?
day of the competition.
The very last day. So yeah, that's a mad scramble to get everything put together.
And I was up till 2:30 a.m. that morning finishing.
Jeez.
And we ended up figuring out that the problem we were having was an 8-line solution that I was being too stubborn to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's code for you.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I wasn't happy.
No. Yeah, that kind of thing, it's always like, oh, come on.
It's so stupid, it shouldn't be that hard to figure out when an apple gets removed from the scene, but not unloaded, removed from the scene.
Yeah. Yeah, it turns out the API just cannot distinguish the two. But it's fine. You got around it.
But yeah, got it done, eventually.
So, a clarification: is that code random, or anything, or
It
it
is
the same
fixed.
every time?
Same every time.
It
okay?
is... Yeah,
Were you considering making it random or seeded?
I was. So
Oh,
the
no.
other thing I was considering was having it be that once you do everything right, it teleports you to a sequence room, and you have to enter a code based on the codes in your actual seed.
Ah, so like it only uses
Yeah.
the ones that it gave you. Okay.
Yep, so you'd have, I think, a 12-digit code, and it would be directly from your seed.
Neat.
But again, time limitations is what threw me off of that.
Makes sense.
Because basically all I'm doing with the current sequence is I'm just changing a bunch of sublayer fog colors
Okay.
and then resetting all of them if they mess up at any point in the code.
Right, so just setting them black or blue.
Whereas if I was going to teleport the player to a sequence room, I would need to have actual text objects of some sort within the script for those, because you wouldn't know what they are when you're just starting,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because it would be random every time.
it would be a lot more bookkeeping.
Yeah, that adds a whole nother set of problems and a bunch of extra lines to the code that I just didn't want to deal with.
Do not have time for it in a single day.
Even without, though, like, didn't have time for it on that given day, it sounded like a lot more of a pain than it was worth for something that would accomplish roughly the same goal.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, the value
It's
add
still
is
really
really
cool.
high.
So yeah, the other thing that was interesting was figuring out what I wanted to do for these Apple gameplay sections.
Yeah, because then on top of the code, you have to also do these side quests.
Yes, and I had to play test these, and I'm not very good at Apple gameplay.
That sounds tricky.
So this was interesting to figure out. So, funny enough, I took some of our advice that we learned from Maddie on
Yeah,
one of
previous
the last
episode.
Mapmaking spotlights, and got some advice from Skyhawk on a couple of things on what are some obscure Apple stuff that he doesn't see a lot, which is where level 1 came from. Level 2 was mainly on this idea of going down with apples, but not just being able to juggle it against the wall or just be able to purely juggle it down. You have to fit some action in between those.
Right. Is it here?
And I think down further.
Ah, yeah, there it is. Here, let me get the fog. There we go.
So I kind of wanted these, like some other parts of the map, to be kind of simple but puzzly. So on this one, it's like just juggling the apple down without hitting the walls isn't all that hard.
Right.
But when
Yeah.
you mix in that other apple with it, it becomes a heck of a lot harder.
Yeah, it's just managing multiple things, and you've got the time limit of gravity working against you.
Yeah. And you just can't bounce it up against that other wall, which I thought made it
hence
a little bit more interesting.
All the jaggedy bits.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense. But it introduces some spike jumps as well, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. So that was interesting. Level 3, obligatory backtrack, because I love doing those in my maps.
Yeah, they're very cool. Let me see if I can actually see the level. Oh, jeez.
Good luck with that.
If you disable layers like 12 to 14, it will actually load. Because all the tiles I use for the background end up hitting that tile limit.
That makes sense.
This was also a problem, I might add, was trying to move around an all black map and actually find anything.
Yeah, know where you are in the void.
But yeah, I
Yeah.
figured most of the level 3 sections would probably be fine with an apple. And then after some judge feedback, I decided to remove the only one that was physically impossible,
Physically
which
impossible?
is the one where you can do the weird spike movement that I showed you.
Weird spike movement you showed me.
The spike ceiling?
Yeah.
Oh,
the
yeah.
slant ceiling.
The one that we ended up talking about in the Discord for a while. There was, oh geez, I'm lost in the void. Here we go. Here, let me just get out of the void.
Oh yeah, that.
Yeah, we have a ceiling like this, and then we have a spike floor like... Oh, where was it exactly? Was it like that?
It's something like that.
Yeah, and
That
then...
might be getting close, but yeah.
I used to have one required, but then I removed it
yeah.
because
We'll see if this works, and then if not, I'll move it around.
I
there we
realized
go.
in retrospect and with judges' feedback that it probably wasn't a good idea to have something so obscure.
Yeah, because we talked about this in the Discord, and people didn't really recognize why it was happening. So, probably a good idea.
Funny enough, I actually saw an SS today by Not Jake that went under using my new route, so I'm really glad I removed it.
Went under? Oh, like in the
Yeah,
section.
so he didn't. Yeah, he didn't do that tech and was able to SS, which
Okay.
made me kind of happy with my decision.
Yeah.
So yeah, once you have all of those done, you go to the Apple secret area.
Yeah. Here,
And with that
I'll head over there.
was a bit above my pay grade to test, and I had Skyhawk test one thing for me.
Yeah. I only tested like one tiny bit of it. You did most of it yourself.
Yeah, so this section draws some inspiration from Kilo of Apples and just other such maps I've seen for apples. Again, trying to basically keep these jagged walls that you can't exactly just juggle an apple against.
Yeah. And then this is what Avenged had me test. It was just, how do you deal with a slope floor like this? And I showed him that this is how you do it, and he was like, oh god, that's terrible. So he gave me that left wall.
I left it in.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, thankfully,
My
I don't.
original idea
have
here
to do
was, yeah,
Instead, you can
spiking
just-
that left wall. And then I realized this is awful. I'm not going to do that to Skyhawk, and gave him a wall to work with
Yeah.
and lowered the ceiling so that it
Kinda
was
nice.
easier to get to.
So, pretty glad for that.
Of course, first try.
Yeah, because this is at the end of like a 6-minute Apple SS. I'm not trying to just
Yeah.
make Skyhawk die.
Just, if I can imagine like elevator music while you're doing that whole bit. So yeah,
Like-
thank you for that. But yeah, I think
People are playing this game to have fun. That just didn't sound like fun.
yeah, I think the in like overall the Apple Secret has a lot of cool different ideas. Like it just dealing with apples in a lot of situations where you have to manage multiple things going on at the same time, and I think that's really
Yeah,
cool.
no, I was very happy with the Apple gameplay on this map.
Yeah.
I think it's some of my best Apple gameplay that I have tested
Nice.
personally. Oh, and also Skyhawk, I'll fully admit I didn't really have intended strats for the level 1 area. I was
That's kind of what I was thinking.
100% figuring you could figure something out for it.
Honestly, I like that method of just creating apple sections. Like, it's cool to just, here you go, have some apples, figure it out. I mean, it's cool to have, like, completely designed sections as well, like, where it's just a well-crafted experience, but also just the puzzle of this is neat.
I think at one point I had, like, all but one of them out, and I was like, yeah, this is probably fine.
Yeah, Skyhawk can do this.
But yeah, I was really happy with the Apple Secret on this map. I think it's honestly one of the best I've ever made.
Yeah, it was very fun.
Outside of text being missing on level 3 because I moved
It's a
the
small
construction
problem.
area down.
It's a good thing you had the individual levels because it ended up working there. So
Man, I was heavily debating not including those on the individual levels too.
on like getting rid of the codes themselves. Like,
Yeah,
so it just,
I didn't have them in the individual levels to begin with.
Right, I guess
Those are
because
put
in the
in-
individual level you don't have the Apple Secret, so this is kind of meaningless.
Yeah, I ended up re-putting them in sometime near the end because I was like, maybe Skyhawk isn't going to want to grind level 3 codes.
Yeah, just going through the entire level every time to get a few more level 3 codes.
Yeah, that just didn't sound like a ton of fun, so I included them in. Good
Cool.
thing I did in retrospect.
Yeah, in hindsight, this is very, very nice. I think the last thing I want to talk about, if we're done talking about apples, is kind of like how you, the judge feedback and how you kind of use that time between judge release and public release to kind of make changes. Did you make changes and what were they?
Yes, I did. So you'll notice one thing right in this very frame. It's that the dust is a different color than the tiles it's on.
Yeah, it's a little bit
I
lighter.
spent a decent amount of time figuring that out. Figuring out how I can make dust spread not awful on this map.
Yeah.
And I still think it's pretty awful in level 3, but it's a hell of a lot better than it was. But if you look in level 1 and level 2 now, it's a lot better than it was. Yeah, the ceilings aren't real, so checkpoint was changed to actually allow you to do a different method.
Ceilings aren't real checkpoint, like the thing we were talking about earlier with the
Yeah.
this like ceiling.
gimmick.
Yep. I also updated the one checkpoint you mentioned was hard in level 2. That a lot of people have mentioned is hard.
Yeah, okay. Let's go to it. If I can find my bearings. I imagine
Don't zoom out
trying
as
to.
much.
Yeah, I imagine trying to make these
yeah.
sections. You just deal with this problem a lot.
Left Skyhawk.
Thank you.
It's right middle of the loading section. God.
Yeah. You learn exactly where every section is.
I moved that light prism plus the block next to it a fair bit closer
Oh, I see.
so that you can have more strategy options in dealing with it without it being dumb.
Yeah.
And I also moved that heavy prism on the bottom a little bit closer
Okay.
because with it being so far away, there were a lot of intuitive ways to do the section that just didn't work. And I wanted to make it a little bit better for that. Like the way you initially did it, where you just light and hit the first upper heavy prism.
Yeah.
That method just like didn't really work all that well with the old prism location.
Okay. Interesting.
Let me think here. What else did I change? I don't think I changed a whole lot on level 1. I think that stuff was mostly set.
Yeah.
Outside of dust colors, obviously.
Yeah.
Well,
Because
the
you said
dust particle effects before or after.
Oh, yes, that's the other thing, is dust particle effect. I used particle editor to just reduce the amount of clutter from leaves and prisms being destroyed.
Yeah, and they've got the
This
firefly effect.
Yeah, this is something I wanted to do for the map competition, I just didn't have enough time.
Yeah, fair enough.
I think this fits much better with the arcade aesthetic than just having them explode does, personally.
Yeah, because I guess the leaf kind of explosion is not very virtual, but then also virtual tiles aren't as opaque, so you kind of get the best of both worlds with this method.
Oh, if you go to level 3,
Sure.
top right section in level...
Top right.
Oh. Yeah, I just meant in the map, whichever one you go to. Top right section.
Sure.
This section was changed to be quite a bit easier.
What did it used to be?
Oh, it's a lot higher up.
Yeah, that spike tile in the middle used to go down one extra tile, and there used to be more dust.
Gotcha.
And it used to just kind of feel like luck whether you actually dashed at the right time or not.
Okay. It definitely seems a lot more manageable in its current state.
Yeah, I realized after watching people fail it for a while that I was kind of just never happy with how it was designed, and was like, yeah, I'm just gonna redesign that.
Yeah.
Just never really felt right that it was just like a really tight dash. A lot tighter than most other things in this map.
Oh, there we go. I was like, the fog trigger looks different.
What text?
Invisible
Oh.
spikes.
Yeah. I think when you originally had this Nexus, the spikes were supposed to be invisible, right?
Yes, They still would be if I didn't have some amazing backgrounds from Cal,
Yeah.
which make it impossible to do the initial idea.
I guess because
you don't
now
want
it's
to make
patterned.
it line up with the patterns behind it.
Yeah. Only have spikes where it lines up with the pattern.
Yeah, also in retrospect, I should say when playing with invisible spikes, I realize even though it changes nothing, you have kind of less of an idea of when you're going to hit the wall
Yeah.
instinctively without the spikes there.
Yeah, just because of the intuition that people build up as they play, I suppose.
Yeah. Let me think. Was there anything else I switched? Taking a look through all these gameplay sections. Multiple text box updates. Obviously, realized there was some errors that I needed to resolve in those.
Yeah, just spelling and stuff.
Yeah. For the Apple secret, I changed the ending lines to not be a text trigger, but instead be a text prop.
Yeah. That makes sense. Just because of the limitations of how text triggers work, and like with the level ending.
Yeah. Which was kind of unfortunate,
Yeah.
but
Oh, this works.
yeah. That was kind of, I will say as well, to the Apple secret discussion, that was kind of my idea as well for the kind of meta story, was basically you don't really have a way to get out unless you do the Apple secret. But you need to take the apple into the Matrix for the Apple secret, and then you get out and you're like, wait, where's my lunch?
Oh, I didn't pick up on that. That's funny.
Yeah, that guy brings an apple to work for lunch. And then when he gets back out
Yeah.
there, he's just like, where's my apple?
An entire body-sized apple. It's very nutritious.
So that guy is canonically Skyhawk then.
Yes.
Alright. Well, I think that's...
I mean, Skyhawk is one of the only people that will see that ending, so yes.
Well, now everybody here has seen it too.
We have a little bit of Skyhawk in all of us.
Alright. I think that's everything I wanted to ask.
Yeah, I have a few more questions.
Go for it.
So with regards to the script and any of that kind of stuff, is there anything that you want to work on related to it moving forward?
Good question.
Yes. I want to generalize this script a lot. I want to
Generalize
make
how?
this. So currently for Dustforce Arcade, I have each level programmed individually.
Hmm.
What I want to do is I want to make everything set up to be in a 2D array and make it so that adding things such as extra layers of tiles you want transported, you can do all of that stuff within script variables rather than having to hard code it in like I have now.
Gotcha.
Basically, lots of decisions were made when making this script that didn't really matter because I was the only one using it, but at some point it's going to need to be redone, and I just didn't want to do it in the span of the competition
Cool.
because it would mean basically redoing all of my code and
I know the feeling.
having to deal with the bugs that come with that, and that just doesn't sound like fun on a short timeline.
Yeah, so you want it to be usable by other people.
It's
Which
usable in its
sounds like a
current
good idea.
form. Yeah, it's usable in its current form. I just would like it to be a bit better. Something... How to put this? From my perspective right now, it's less of a finished script and more of something you could use if you wanted to.
Yeah,
Yeah, or
it's
maybe
always
talk
something
with
to
Avenged.
at the moment.
Yeah, it's not like the level of polish that, say, Layer Controller, Advanced Tools, anything like that has in terms of, like, UI, usability, all that type of stuff.
Even then, I think.
That being
layer
said, though,
control-
like in my usage of like adding sections and stuff, it was pretty slick still. Like it was really easy to add a section,
yeah,
test it out.
I'm
and
curious
use it.
about your experience of that. So, like, what was your kind of workflow?
In like creating new sections.
Yeah.
So I tried to create like one or two at a time, I guess, and then try to generate a seed that actually had them.
Yeah.
Adding them is actually quite easy because like the script itself, you just tell it to add a couple of new sections and you set the boundaries of the new sections and where they start and end, and
Okay.
it just kind of all works after you do that.
So for designing a section, did you kind of like just pick a size and then kind of work within that, or did you just kind of have it?
Yeah, so I
grow
used a
and
lot of
expand?
what Avenged already had set up. So I just kind of stole that size and put different kind of gameplay in it.
Okay.
I saw that Avenged used a lot of the small prism and large prism, so I kept that in my
Yeah,
sections
kept
too.
that theme.
Yeah. I thought it was a theme, and then I asked Avenged about it. It's like,
Yeah.
it's not really a theme, but...
I mean, it's a theme
It
now.
is and it isn't.
I think it works.
But yeah, so that's how I go about it. And I also noticed that Avenged sections were more puzzly, so I tried to add, I guess, more boosty stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
less
it's the
puzzly.
variety.
Mhm.
Funny enough, I actually liked a lot that you did that because I think it adds more of those route options that I was talking about. A lot of your sections ended up being some of the faster ones, and I liked having them.
All right.
Or at least a lot of the ones that would feel faster. I don't know if they actually
Yeah.
ended up being faster.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. I'm curious when or if like people will really grind for the perfect seed and the perfect strats.
Yeah, I think the perfect seed is gonna more end up being the shorter sections rather than the boosty ones, but maybe you could get a boost into a short section or something that'll
Yeah, maybe.
actually save time.
Yeah, I'll be really interested to see where that map ends up if more people decide to actually grind it.
Just wait until it becomes a
Uh,
daily.
Yep.
I think it can. I think we have 5 SSs on it now.
Are there
else
any
do
like scrapped gameplay other than some of the secret stuff that we mentioned?
Yes. Skyhawk, can you go to level 3 mid right?
Level 3.
Well, other than like one segment,
That one gigawall
is
section.
there any other kinds of gameplay you wanted to have but didn't, or were you able to just fit in just about everything? Like say a city level, for instance, you might have wanted to do.
Oh, yeah. I had ideas for other levels. The 2 major constraints I had, though, were time and gameplay ideas. The biggest challenge with a map like this is coming up with interesting gameplay when you need 3 times as much gameplay as the map would normally have.
Yeah, 3 times more than any one person would see.
Yeah, that actually kind of leads into the next question. But were you going anywhere else with that? Like anything
And
specific?
to add to that, specifically, I had an idea for a city level, which would have been introducing this concept of the different levels of generation. So you'd have, I think the idea was something kind of like Thief, where you'd be going from skyscraper to skyscraper. Each one of those skyscrapers would be its own level of one section, and that section would choose between, say, 3 options for that level. And really, I just didn't end up having time, and I felt like the individual levels kind of added the same effect of preparing you for Dustforce Arcade.
So do you mean something like comparing or combining a few combo levels on one skyscraper or something like that? Not necessarily like
Yeah, could do
detailed
something like
combat
that.
or anything. But it could have
More
different
so
enemy
just,
orientations.
An idea of going through like 3 buildings when you don't always know what's going to be in those buildings. So it could have
Okay.
been combat, it could have been less combat. I think that probably would have been more combat focused.
But more like a few segments per building.
Yeah. Like, very low amount of segment numbers, but having that idea of different specific levels, and you can only get these sections in this level and these sections in this level.
Okay.
So yeah.
Well, what about in terms of different kinds of gameplay altogether? So what I mean by that is like changing the rules of Dustforce to an extent. What if you could have an endless level, for instance? Were you thinking about any of that in relation to this project? Like, I would imagine you would have had to set it aside earlier, but was any of that in mind for you?
Not at any point in this project, really. That's kind of more come to mind after the competition. Thinking about whether it would be possible, even.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, like, at the very beginning of the project, that was kind of just in your head because of, like, the example that you showed off with the labyrinth.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, that's true.
just with the current iteration of the script, it's not really one of the considerations, I think.
It's an interesting problem, is what I can say.
Yeah.
Because if I wanted to keep it the way I had it, and deal with all of the unloading issues that would come with that, what I'd essentially have to do is take all of my possible sections, and after the player moves some amount of distance, take all of those sections, move them some amount of distance, and then keep going, basically.
And just carry this whole library with you as you move.
Well,
Yes.
yeah, if you wanted to do it that way, then the way Skyhawk handled it in Labyrinth seemed appropriate.
Yeah, it's either
also, where you do one at a time.
it's either that or you handle it the way that Skyhawk handled it. The way that Skyhawk handled it is by, I think, having a 2D array for each of these and basically storing all of these sections in memory.
Yeah, rather than having them
Yeah,
in the world.
I would figure rather than putting it in the world, it would be in memory. Just something kind of hard-coded in to an extent.
Yeah,
But yeah,
and that's
it's
something you can do too.
Certainly a variation that could be done in the future if somebody wanted to, say,
Yeah.
expand on this script and talk to Avenge about it. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. People in chat.
I will also say it's not... My script right now isn't set up to generate section by section, is the
Yeah.
other difficulty with that.
Right, hence the loading screens.
Yes. Loading screens aren't great, but the way that I did it, I kind of needed them.
Yeah, I think it works. Like, I don't think anybody was
Uh,
confused what was happening or was angry at them. I think they understood the purpose of them.
Oh, right. For the record as well, I did make those loading screens shorter by exactly a second
Wow.
on each of them. But
What's the
the-
reason for requiring the time, by the way?
the
I wanted to
reason
ask
for...
more about how everything worked. But, I mean, we kind of very slowly addressed some of it.
Yeah, we
and
just
assumed it.
here and there.
The reason for requiring a minimum time is because we, at some point during the project, had an instance error where the level was trying to load before the player was actually in the loading area,
Oh,
which
actually,
caused the sections to not actually generate properly.
I remember what it was. It was the camera. Because the camera did not, like, the player would warp immediately, but the camera would kind of, like, ease over there. And so even though things should have been loaded based on where the player was, the camera hadn't quite gotten there. And so some of the sections were still off screen, which is way too far.
So you have to put in, like, I think I put in a 60 frame window to make sure all of that stuff would be caught up.
Yeah.
And then an extra 1 second on top of that, just to make sure that you're not going to be lagging once you enter the map, to make sure you can actually play the map.
Yeah, because some of the levels that don't have loading screens, you definitely notice the little jump as it loads in everything.
Introductions is an unfortunate case that I didn't really have a solution for unless I was just going to add a time gate at the end of the loading screen or something.
Yeah.
I figured it was probably a simple enough map that I just wasn't going to really worry too much about it, but not exactly the best way to handle it, I'd say.
Yeah, you've got me thinking a bit about how else you could handle something like this, like everything loading in pretty much. And I was thinking about like how other games could address something like that too.
Yeah.
So for instance, and these are not easy to implement by any means, but wouldn't it be interesting if you had some of like let's imagine in this loading area you could see the level being moved in front of you, like animated in to an extent, kind of like you see columns of tiles appear at certain times. Something like that would be very aesthetically pleasing, but obviously, the hardest kind of thing to include, especially because animating tiles just really means some stuff with effects and not chunking, or you'd have to chunk within each segment even more.
Yeah. Oh, one other thing that Skyhawk just showed off, I did end up as well in that extra week making it so that it generates on several frames. I think I spread it over like 5 frames.
Nice.
It really didn't help with lag that much from my experience.
Yeah, it still does have to do the same amount of work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder
But-
if maybe, like, the only thing I can think of is just spreading it out even more. Like,
Right.
you, instead of just generating it all at the start, you do that thing where it generates as you progress. But that would have required a
Yeah.
whole rework, so not exactly something
Yeah.
you can do in the last week.
It's something that if
Yeah.
you had a lot of time, I'd significantly suggest.
It's
But
something
right.
that can be done on rework of it,
For sure.
which is, yeah, kind of why I'd like to do more of a generalization project so that
Yeah.
I can actually set up instances where, you can generate by section, you can generate all at once.
So this possible reworking eventually being handled, hopefully, like whenever you're working on that kind of stuff. Would you ever consider like a re-release of this Nexus that might redo a lot of, well, how it is handled as a whole? Like just a separate Nexus altogether.
Possibly consider doing a separate Nexus.
That's what I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah,
I would 100% suggest like if you're gonna rework it to that extent, you might as well revisit the design of the gameplay for one, to see like to get a lot more playtesting in. That's basically what I'm referring to, not like it has to flow a specific way. But also like you can just make sure that it's introduced in a very specific way. You can do really crazy stuff with the Nexus itself. Basically everything that you could have on a wish list could be addressed, or at least
100% agree.
Yeah.
or at least kind of crossed off as too crazy.
all this to say, I think we think the script has a lot of potential for
Yes.
for interesting things.
Yeah, I am very interested in where this kind of stuff goes.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see if anybody wants to work with it in the future.
Yeah, within the confines of how the competition had to score things, like I didn't want to dwell on how the judges had to address some of it because it's not scored on the same kind of spectrums as nicely compared to
Yeah,
the other
no.
maps.
And I think it was Miles and J-Dude's comments kind of led me to understand that, because I think both of them basically said, hey, these comments don't necessarily reflect my personal opinions about the fact that this script is cool. or something to the effect of, I need to score this objectively, but this is really neat.
Yeah, and like, I mean, I for one, assuming you continue to work on any of this kind of stuff, would be interested in helping with playtesting or any of that, and would definitely want to help contribute any like weird gameplay scripts on top of this, such as changing up that standard like try to SS gameplay. Like, why not have a few maps that use the idea, but change it up even more? Something like endless. Like, you can have an endless section in the Nexus. You can have a bunch of weird stuff, really.
Oh, that would be wild, having a Nexus secret.
Yeah, there's just so much potential that you can have in a tech demo.
Well,
Yeah.
I think we'll cut off the speculating here, and we'll call it an end
Yeah.
of the interview. So, thank you, Avenged, and thank you, Kau, for joining us and talking about your Nexus.
Yeah,
Any
no
last
problem.
comments you
No
want to
problem.
say about all that?
Cameras in scripts are annoying.
True.
Yeah,
That is
one
my
of
last
my
comment about the
one of my
script.
first few sections I made really destroyed the camera.
I've tried
That'd be
one
funny.
script with the camera once, and then I decided never again.
Yeah. All right. Next episode is going to be this Sunday, and it's going to be with some of the individual map makers, HGT and Not Jake, as well as Negalaria's Nexus. So join us then for that. Is anybody streaming? Doesn't seem like
Doesn't
it.
look like it.
So I will just say thank you for watching and have a good night.
Yeah, night everyone.
Night.